Today we're going to talk about something that excites me, but also at the same time intimidates me. Last week we talked about discipline and how God disciplines us because He loves us. And after the conversation, the sermon on Sunday, we went to lunch as a family, and everybody started reminiscing about times of discipline. And perhaps many of you did the same. It's because sometimes in life when we're disciplined, as the Bible says, no discipline is pleasant at the time. But afterwards, you're so thankful for what you learned from it. And immediately on the heels of talking about discipline, the Hebrew writer talks about faith makes every effort. I came across several things this week that are descriptive of what a lot of people might think. Because see, some of us in this room, perhaps a lot of us, when we really think about it, we don't try really hard. We try sort of hard, we try kind of hard, but then when things get a little bit tough, we quit. And Christmas and New Year's, especially New Year's, is when we all make New Year's resolutions. But the problem is when we make New Year's resolutions, we decide, even when we're making them, that we're not going to try real hard. And we plan to fail. And so this morning, we're going to talk about making every effort. Too many of us have million-dollar dreams with a minimum wage work ethic. Sam Ewing said, hard work spotlights the character of people. Some turn up their sleeves, some turn up their noses, and some don't turn up at all. Sarah Brown says, the only thing that sat its way to success was a hen. God gave us two ends, we're told, one to sit on and one to think with. Success depends on which one you use. Head, you win. Tail, you lose. Gloria Pitzer says about the only thing that comes to us without effort is old age. And so the Hebrew writer says, make every effort. And the sermon only has 2 points. Point number 1, make every effort to live in peace with everyone. Let's read what he says. That's exactly what he says. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone. Now, I want us to notice 2 things about what it says. It says we're to live in peace, not at peace. Which means that I take into the relationship peace. I don't wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I take into relationships, into homes, into work, into the team, in peace. And the Hebrew writer says the point is to live in peace with everyone. Now the word make every effort is the idea of a hunter who tracks down his prey without giving up until he finally brings it down. He goes all out. He pushes. He bends over backwards. He goes for broke. He knocks himself out. He leaves no stone unturned. He makes every effort. He doesn't quit. He stays at it. He makes every effort. Now, why is that so important? Because Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, these words. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion. Now, what does that mean? The devil is hunting too. He prowls around like a roaring lion. He goes all out. He pushes. He bends over backwards. He goes for broke. He knocks himself out. He leaves no stone unturned. He prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him. Firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. Why is it so important to live at peace with everyone? Because Satan is prowling around as a hunter trying to get you out of peace. He's trying to get you agitated. He's trying to get you frustrated. He's trying to get you angry. He's trying to get you irritated. And he prowls around and pokes and prods, and he will not stop. He will not let any stone go unturned. Several years ago, there was a story about the Special Olympics in Seattle, Washington. There were 9 contestants that were running the 100-yard dash. And they all stood at the line ready to take off for this big race that they had practiced for months getting ready for. The gun went off. Everybody took off except one young man. He stumbled on the asphalt at the beginning and tumbled over a couple of times, and he began to cry. The story says that all other 8 contestants stopped in their tracks. They walked back. They picked the young boy up, and arm in arm, they walked across the finish line. And this went all across the news wires, and everybody was all excited because the story said, one little girl who had Down syndrome reached down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." The only problem with the story is it was partly true. It is true it was a Special Olympics. It is true that 9 contestants were at the beginning, and it is true the gun went off. It is true they all took off. It is true that one of them stumbled. It is true that he began to cry. What wasn't true is that all 8 turned around to help him. Just 1 or 2 turned around to help him. And the rest finished the race. But the 1 or 2 that turned around and came back and helped him up finished the race together. And that is what went on the news wires, but it was a little bit distorted as it was reported. And perhaps one of the things that we're concerned about is these people made every effort. They made every effort to run that race, but only 1 or 2 made an effort to go back and help the poor young man who had fallen. That wasn't the case with Mary Decker. Many of you maybe didn't hear of Mary Decker. She ran distance events in the 1984 Olympics. She trained and trained and trained, and this was her big event. This was her dream that she was pursuing at the 1984 Olympics. Her nemesis, her adversary, was a young lady named Zola Budd, who was from South Africa. And Zola Budd ran barefoot. And so Mary Decker and Zola Budd began this event in front of all the people at the Olympics, and they ran lap after lap after lap with Zola Budd right on Mary Decker's shoulder. When suddenly Mary Decker decided to change her plan. And she slowed and let Zola Bud go in front of her. And she stayed on Zola Bud's shoulder and ran lap after lap until there were 3 laps to go. Both runners were straining for the goal, and Mary Decker's spiked shoes nicked Zola Bud's heel. Not once, but twice, maybe 3 times. And Zola Bud tumbled in a heap on the track. And when she tumbled, so did Mary Decker. And Mary Decker's dream vanished. Zola Bud, after the race was over, approached Mary Decker to apologize to her. To which Mary Decker said, "Don't bother." Later, a reporter came up and stuck a microphone in Mary Decker's face and said, "Is it true that Zola Bud came up to you and tried to express sorrow, and you said, 'Leave me alone'?" And Mary Decker said, "I didn't say, 'Leave me alone.' I said, 'Don't bother.'" When I think about it now, I should have pushed her. But if I had pushed her, tomorrow the headlines would have read, "Decker shoves Zola." With 3 laps to go, the most important race of her life, she made every effort, and it ended in defeat, and her peace vanished. So what does it mean to live in peace with everyone? What does it mean to walk into relationships looking for a fight? What does it mean to walk into a circumstance and try to force everyone to be upset? I love what the psalmist says in Psalms 120, verses 6 and 7. "Too long I have had my dwelling among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war." Ever been there? You try so hard to be at peace with people, but they aren't at peace with you. And it seems like no matter what you do, how hard you try, they just want to fight. And they just want to pick a fight. Proverbs 17, verse 14 says this: "The beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out." Last week, there's a big study about Lake Louisville. It seems that the dam at Lake Louisville is compromised. And there's much worry about the dam breaking and water flooding the entire Metroplex area. And that's what this is talking about. It's talking about the beginning of strife is like a dam that breaks. And he says, so quit before the dam breaks. Have you ever awakened in the morning and you encounter someone and you think to yourself, if I just say one thing, it'll make it all better. So I'm just going to say this one little thing. And when I say this one little thing, this other person is going to realize the error of his or her ways. It's going to change. He's going to change. It's going to be great. And so you say it. And the quarrel breaks out. And the peace is gone. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And then the Apostle Paul says these words in Romans chapter 12, verse 18. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Make every effort to be in peace with everyone. Have you ever wondered why when you go to the hospital and you go to the emergency room, or you're in a bed and they're about ready to perform surgery on you, they ask the same questions over and over and over again? And you know what they ask you? What medications are you on? And the reason they ask you that question is because the doctors need to know what kind of chemicals are in your blood system. Because they're smart enough to know that if there are these chemicals that are lurking in your blood system to try to take care of certain difficulties that you are having physically, they know if they prescribe a medication for you to take, or if they give you a drug in the ER that counteracts or has an explosion with another chemical, they could put you in a very serious, life-threatening circumstance. And so they ask you, what medications are you on? Because it's going to make sure, they're going to try to make sure they don't prescribe a medication that will counteract what that drug is doing and put you in harm's way. Because they understand in each of us, there are certain chemicals at work. And so Paul and the Hebrew writer and Jesus, they all say the same thing. If it's possible, as much as it depends on you, you need to live in peace with everyone. And then Paul says this in Romans 14, verse 19. He says, so let us then pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Now, the Hebrew writer had it right. He says, it takes effort. So I want to ask you a question this morning. Are you making every effort to live in peace with people? Or are you chronically looking for a fight? Are you chronically pointing and frustrated and angry and trying to arouse people's anger, looking for discomfort and to upset people? Because the Bible says, if you're a son of God, one of the things that distinguishes Christians from everyone else is Christians make every effort to live in peace with everyone. And then he goes on and he says this, and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And to be holy, make every effort to be holy. Now, what does that mean? How many of you got up this morning and thought to yourself, today I'm going to make every effort to be holy? How many of you honestly thought that? You woke up today, you looked at yourself in the mirror image looked back at you, and you said to the person looking at you in the mirror, today, we're going to do everything we can to be holy. I would imagine not one person in this room thought those words. But the Hebrew writer says you need to make every effort to do two things. Number one, to live in peace with everyone. And number two, to be holy. Because without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Now, what is holiness? Well, I don't know exactly what it is. I just know I don't want to be it. Because if you're holy, you think you're better than everybody else. And if you're holy, you're stuck up and you are sort of to yourself and you think that you're a cut above people, and I just don't want to do that. I just don't want to be that. If that's what holiness is, I don't want any part of it. You know there's a little gland at the base of your brain. It's called the hypothalamus gland. It's about the shape of a walnut. It's the gland that determines what you look at, how you feel about things when you look through your eyes. For instance, if you're thinking about buying a car, the hypothalamus gland at the base of your brain, when you go out driving your car, it starts making you very aware of every other car you see. Because you're thinking about buying a car, and so you're scoping out all these cars to determine which car you want to buy. And so the hypothalamus gland secretes all these chemicals into your system to help you be aware of cars so that you're looking for a car you might want to buy. Or if you're single and you want to be married or you want to date, the hypothalamus gland at the base of your brain starts, when you go out in public, you're scoping out people that are potential candidates for you to be married to. And you're watching guys, you're watching girls, you're thinking, yep, that's good. Nope, that's not good. That's a possibility. No, that's not a possibility. The hypothalamus gland helps you, it directs your eyes and ears to see and hear the things that you think are important. And so what this says is that when, as Christians, we give our lives to Jesus, what motivates us is that we want to be like God, and He is holy. And so the way we look at life, the way we look at people, the way we look at our jobs, the way we look at relationships, is that we want to be like God is, because He's holy. And I want to be like that. Richard Wurmbrand spent 14 years in a Nazi concentration camp, and several of those years he spent in solitary confinement. He was tortured brutally by the prison guards. And one day he said that he had learned from the guards. And somebody said, "You learned from these brutal guards? What did you learn?" He said these words: "As they allowed no place for Jesus in their hearts, I decided I would leave not the smallest part in mine for Satan." Have you ever gone shopping at the grocery store? That's what holiness is. It's like going to the grocery store and shopping for fruit. You've done that. Take out one of those plastic bags and you look at all this fruit. You look it over and you pick up one piece of fruit and you put it in the bag. It becomes holy to you because you look over all this fruit and you decide, that's the piece of fruit I want for myself. And you look over grapefruit or oranges or pears or apples, and you pick certain fruit and you put it in the plastic bag and you take it home and it becomes separate for you. Or you go to a store in the mall and you're shopping for clothes. And you push back all these different clothes until you pick out one or two or three that you think might have possibilities. And then you go back to the changing rooms and you put them on and you look at yourself in the mirror and you think to yourself, yes or no? Does it make me look good or does it make me look bad? Does it set me apart or does it make me look worse? And so you, out of all these clothes on all this rack, you pick certain clothes, you pick out the ones, and you go to the cashier, and the cashier checks you out, and sometimes the cashier looks at you and says, now that's a beautiful dress, or sometimes the cashier looks at you and goes, oh, now that's a dress. And the cashier's thinking, you think that's But it's all in your hypothalamus gland at the back of your brain, and you think all these things. Or you go to a restaurant, and they hand you a menu, and you decide you're going to pick something to eat. And you look at all the choices, hundreds of choices, and you decide, I'm going to eat that. I'm going to separate that from everything else because that's what I want to eat. And you make that thing holy. It's unique to you. The dress is holy. The fruit is holy. You separate it out for yourself. And God says, I want you to make every effort to separate yourself out to belong to me. Because the real word for holiness is wholeness. To make you whole. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 25, God says, to whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One. In Mark chapter 21, verse 24, Jesus confronts a demon-possessed man. And the demon says this, what have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. And in Romans chapter 1, verse 4, it says of Jesus, and he was declared to be the Son of God in power according to the Spirit of holiness by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. Which means this, God is holy. Jesus is holy. When you become a Christian, you receive the gift of the Holy Spirit to live in you. And his major responsibility is to make you holy like he is. And this is an interesting scripture in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 through 27. Listen what it says. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she may be holy and without blemish. So I've been dealing with an international student from the University of Texas at Dallas. I was assigned this gentleman. He's 30 years old and was a professor at a university in Turkey, in Istanbul. And he is Muslim. When he drew my name, he knew that I was a Christian pastor. But he decided that he wanted to interact with a Christian pastor in the United States of America. And so I met Ennis several months ago, and I've been carrying on a relationship with him. And so I invited him to our home for Thanksgiving. And then I invited him to our home again for Christmas. And so when I invited him to our home for Christmas, he said, well, what kind of meat are you going to have at your home for Christmas? I said, well, we're probably going to have some kind of beef or something like that. He said, well, I have to have a special kind of meat where the blood has been completely drained out of it. It's called halal meat. Are you going to have that kind of meat at your Christmas meal? And up until that point, I wasn't planning on having halal meat. But I quickly said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have halal meat." I said, "Where do you get halal meat anyway?" He said, "Well, I'll text you a place where you can go get it." I said, "Okay." So he texted me this supermarket in Richardson, Texas, and I waited until the 23rd of December to go buy this meat. So I thought, well, I'll just go in there and order some beef tenderloin, and it'll be great. So I'm following my GPS to get over to this place, and I turned down this street, and oh my goodness, there were all these cars. And I thought, I didn't know people even knew about halal meat. What are all these people doing at this place? And so I got out of my car and I walked into this supermarket, and there are all these people in there with burqas, and there were Jewish people in there, Muslim people in there, there were Caucasian people in there. All different kinds of people were in this supermarket. I'm 67 years old, and I've never been to a place like that before in my life. So I walk up to the meat counter, and there are these people back there, and they're incredibly nice to me. And I said, "Do you have any, I think it's called halal meat?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we have halal meat." I said, "Well, I need some beef tenderloin." And the guy looked at me and said, "Well, we're out. We don't have any beef tenderloin." I'm thinking, oh no, this is horrible. I said, "Well, do you have anything that's kind of like that?" And he said, "We have rib roast." And he goes back to the back and he brings out this big old piece of meat, this rib roast, and he said, "I can cut this up for you, and let's see, if I cut up this way, how many people are you going to have to feed?" I said, "I think we're going to have like 20 or so." And he said, "Well, if you cut this much up, you can have this kind of meat." And I said, "Well, I'm not real sure." And I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to do this. And I said, finally, I said, "Are there any other places that I can buy beef tenderloin?" And he said, "Well, yeah, there's another place down on Coit and Arapahoe. There's a market down there." So I get in my car, and I drive down to Coit and Arapahoe, drive up to this place. It's called the Scheherazade Supermarket. And I walk in, same deal. There's all these people with burqas. I walk back to the meat counter, and there are two Hispanic guys back at the meat counter. I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing in this restaurant? And finally I said, "Do you have any halal meat?" They said, "Absolutely." I said, "You wouldn't have to have any beef tenderloin, would you?" He said, "Oh, sure, it's right here." And I said, "Well, I need to feed about 20 people or so." And he said, "Well, this is good, but I've got some really good meat in the back." I said, "Well, let me see that." And he was so nice to me. So we're talking over the counter, and finally we make these executive decisions about one kind of meat that we're supposed. And I haven't told Keisha anything about this. When Keisha said it, I said, "Well, what are we going to have for meat for Christmas?" She said, "I think we're going to have beef tenderloin." I said, "Okay, I'll take care of the meat." She said, "But it's important to know how much meat and how much it's going to weigh." I said, "Why don't I do?" "No, that's okay. I'll take care of the meat." She didn't know I'd had this conversation with Ennis. She didn't know I was looking for halal meat. She didn't know any of that stuff, but I was doing this all on the sly. And she doesn't know. Well, so anyway, so I get the meat. I take it into my home. And I said, "Keisha, here's the meat." And finally, over the course of a couple of days, I spilled the beans that this is what it's all about. So we get there for Christmas dinner, and we're having halal meat, and it's wonderful. And Ennis comes in, and I said, this is good. And he has the meat, and we all sit down and eat together. And I'm thinking to myself, because I know what I'm preaching about today. Make every effort to live at peace with everyone, including Muslims. And to be holy. Because without holiness, you can't see God. And I'm thinking to myself, when I'm doing this whole thing, God, I really need to find this meat at this supermarket because, I'm going out of my way to do this anyway, and so I really need to find it here. And then I didn't find it there. So I'm on my way to the car thinking, God, I'm trying to be a nice guy here. I'm trying to be a good Christian. I'm trying to extend courtesy and love to somebody that I disagree with religiously. You'd think you could kind of help me out here. But now I'm going to have to go down the street, and I'm going to have to spend more gas. I'm going to have to spend more time. I mean, you should make this easy. And then I read where it says, make every effort to live at peace with everyone and to be holy. And I realized in my life, when you talk about being holy, if we're totally honest, there are some times I just don't want to be. You ever had moments like that? I mean, you know what you're supposed to do up here. You know how you're supposed to act. You know you're supposed to try and make every effort to be at peace with people. You know that up here. But quite frankly, you just don't feel like it. You come to church on Sunday morning, and they put the words on the screen, and you think to yourself, I don't feel like singing today. I think I'll just stand here with my hands in my pockets and watch everybody else sing, but it's just not there, I just don't feel it. I don't feel like praying today. I mean, I know I should pray. I know I should talk to God, but I don't feel like talking to Him today. I just don't feel it. And I know I'm supposed to not say these things about people. And I know that I'm not supposed to be looking for a fight with people. And I know all that, but I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel like being good. I don't feel like behaving myself. I want to be bad. Be holy like I am holy, God says. And then Jesus comes to our planet dealing with a lot of unholy people. And He doesn't just go to the supermarket in Richardson. He goes to the cross. And He doesn't just put up with them running out of meat. He puts up with people saying, if you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. And they spit at Him and they mock at Him. And if I'm Jesus, I'm thinking to myself, I'm doing all this for these people who don't even want to be holy. They don't care what I think. They don't care what I'm like. They just want to be done with me. So why should I put up with people who don't even want to be good? They just want to be bad. They just want to do whatever they want, and they don't want to be like me. And why should I want to be married to them? But then Paul says that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she, that me, might be holy. Because when I live in peace with everyone, and I make every effort to be holy, that's when I see God. You ever wondered why you don't see God? It might be because you're not making much effort to be at peace with people. And it may be that you're not making much effort to be holy. I don't know about you, but I've been convicted. I sit across the table from this guy who I disagree with religiously. I disagree with some of the tenets that he believes. But I got to admire somebody that says, hey, what kind of meat you eating on Christmas? Because I can't eat certain kinds of meat. And I'm thinking to myself, do I have that kind of belief system that I'm willing to adjust my lifestyle because I think God is so important that I can't do that? Am I like that? I was talking to Linda this morning back in the back. It's a guy that she talked to in Germany. He said that when he was talking to her privately that he was tempted to date Muslim girls. And you know the reason? Because they keep themselves pure until they get married. And that's the problem we have in our world today. We have a religious system that we disagree with as Christians. But sometimes these people have deeper beliefs than we do. And that's why the Apostle Paul, that's why the Hebrew writer says, make every effort to be in peace with everyone and to be holy. Because without holiness, you can't see God. Now, you're going to be upset with me now, and I'm going to say something that you're going to wish I hadn't said. But let me tell you something. That means the way we talk to each other. And some of you kids who use the F-bomb all the time, and some of you kids who think it's cool to be profane and say things you shouldn't say, it means you change the words you use because you're a Christian, and Christians don't talk like that. And some of you adults who use words you shouldn't use, and when you get agitated and upset and angry and frustrated, and those words just escape from your mouths because it just seems to sum up the frustrations of your heart, maybe we need to make every effort to be holy about what we say. The words that we use. Because without holiness, without incorporating that into our language, into the way we speak, we will not see God. Okay, I've bared my soul to you today, and I don't know, it's right before a wedding. So, but this two parts of this sermon, make every effort to be in peace and to be holy. And when you do that, you will see God.